Simon Callow.
And this is Harry Potter at Home, and I am at home in my office.
I am here in my home, in my living room.
Unfortunately, I can't see very well through the SpectraSpecs, so I'm going to put them here. And I have the utter joy today of reading from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
And I am very excited to be reading today from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
And I'm going to read chapter 5 of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. This chapter is called Diagon Alley. Harry awoke early the next morning. Although he could tell it was daylight, he kept his eyes shut tight. It was a dream, he told himself firmly. I dreamt a giant called Hagrid came to tell me I was going to a school for wizards. When I open my eyes, I'll be at home, in my cupboard. There was suddenly a loud tapping noise. Oh, and there's Aunt Petunia knocking on the door, Harry thought, his heart sinking. But he still didn't open his eyes. It had been such a good dream. Tap, 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 tap. All right, Harry mumbled. I'm getting up. He sat up, and Hagrid's heavy coat fell off him. The hut was full of sunlight. The storm was over. Hagrid himself was asleep on the collapsed sofa. And there was an owl rapping its claw on the window. A newspaper held
Love
in
you.
its
Have a
beak.
good day at work, baby.
Harry scrambled to his feet, so happy he felt as though a large balloon was swelling inside him. He went straight to the window and jerked it open. The owl
Yeah, you might need
swooped
that.
in and dropped the newspaper on top of Hagrid, who didn't wake up. The owl then fluttered onto the floor and began to attack Hagrid's coat. Don't do that. Harry tried to wave the owl out of the way, but it snapped its beak fiercely at him and carried on savaging the coat. Hagrid, said Harry loudly, there's an owl. Pie him. Hagrid grunted into the sofa. What? He wants paying for delivering the paper. Look in the pockets. Hagrid's coat seemed to be made of nothing but pockets. Bunches of keys, slug pellets, balls of string, mint humbugs, tea bags. Finally, Harry pulled out a handful of strange-looking coins. Give
Excuse
him
me.
5 nuts, said Hagrid sleepily. Nuts? Little bronze ones. Harry counted out 5 little bronze coins, and the owl held out its leg so he could put the money into a small leather pouch tied to it. Then it flew off through the open window. Hagrid yawned loudly. Sat up and stretched. Best be off, Harry. Lots to do today. Gotta get up to London and buy all your stuff for school. Harry was turning over the wizard coins and looking at them. He'd just thought of something which made him feel as though the happy balloon inside him had got a puncture. Hagrid? Said Hagrid, who was pulling on his huge boots. I haven't got any money. And you heard Uncle Vernon last night. He won't pay for me to go and learn magic. Don't worry about that, said Hagrid, standing up and scratching his head. Do you think your parents didn't leave you anything? But if the house was destroyed, I didn't keep their gold in the house, boy. Well, no. First stop for us is Gringotts, Wizard's Bank. Have a sausage. They're not bad cold. And I wouldn't say no to a bit of your birthday cake, neither. Wizards have banks? Just to one. Gringotts, run by goblins. Harry dropped the bit of sausage he was holding. Goblins? Yeah. So you'd be mad to try and rob it, I'll tell you that. Never mess with goblins, Harry. Gringotts is the safest place in the world
for anything you want to keep safe, except maybe Hogwarts, as a matter of fact. I've got to visit Gringotts anyway, for Dumbledore. Hogwarts business.
Hagrid drew himself up proudly.
He usually gets me to do important stuff for him. Fetching you, getting things from Gringotts. He knows he can trust me. See? Got everything? Come on in.
Harry followed Hagrid out onto the rock. The sky was quite clear now, and the sea gleamed in the sunlight. The boat Uncle Vernon had hired was still there, with a lot of water in the bottom after the storm. How did you get here? Harry asked, looking round for another boat.
Flew,
said Hagrid. Flew?
Yeah, but we'll go back in. It's not supposed to use magic. Now I've got ya.
They settled down in the boat, Harry still staring at Hagrid, trying to imagine him flying.
Seems a shame to row, though,
said Hagrid, giving Harry another of his sideways looks.
If I was to, speed things up a bit, would you mind not mentioning it at Hogwarts?
Of course not, said Harry, eager to see more magic. Hagrid pulled out the pink umbrella again, tapped it twice on the side of the boat, and they sped off towards land. Why would you be mad to try and rob Gringotts? Harry asked.
Spells, enchantments, said Hagrid,
unfolding his newspaper as he spoke.
They say there's dragons guarding the high security vaults. And then you got to find your way. Gringotts is hundreds of miles under London, see? Deep under the underground. You'd die of hunger trying to get out, even if you did manage to get your hands on something.
Harry sat and thought about this while Hagrid read his newspaper, The Daily Prophet. Harry had learned from Uncle Vernon that people liked to be left alone while they did this, but it was very difficult. He'd never had so many questions in his life.
Ministry of Magic messing things up, as usual,
Hagrid muttered, turning the page. There's a Ministry of Magic? Harry asked, before he could stop himself.
Of course there is, said Hagrid. They wanted Dumbledore for minister, of course, but he'd never leave Hogwarts. So old Cornelius Fudge got the job. Bungler, if ever there was one. So he pelts Dumbledore with owls every morning asking for advice.
But what does a Ministry of Magic do?
Well, their main job is to keep it from the muggles. And there's still witches and wizards up and down the country.
Why?
Why? Blimey, Harry. Everyone would be wanting magic solutions to their problems. We're best left alone.
At this moment, the boat bumped gently into the harbour wall. Hagrid folded up his newspaper, and they clambered up the stone steps onto the street. Passers-by stared a lot at Hagrid as they walked through the little town to the station. Harry couldn't blame them. Not only was Hagrid twice as tall as anyone else, he kept pointing at perfectly ordinary things like parking meters and saying loudly, "See that, Harry? Things these muggles dream up, eh?" Hagrid, said Harry, panting a bit as he ran to keep up. Did you say there are dragons at Gringotts?
Well, so they say, said Hagrid. Crikey, I'd like a dragon.
You'd like one?
Wanted one ever since I was a kid. Here we go.
They reached the station. There was a train to London in 5 minutes' time. Hagrid, who didn't understand muggle money, as he called it, gave the notes to Harry so he could buy their tickets. People stared more than ever on the train. Hagrid took up 2 seats and sat knitting what looked like a canary yellow circus tent.
Still got your letter, Harry?
He asked as he counted stitches. Harry took the parchment envelope out of his pocket.
Good, said Hagrid. Good. There's a list there of everything you need.
Harry unfolded a second piece of paper he hadn't noticed the night before and read, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. First-year students will require 1. 3 sets of plain work robes, black. 2. 1 plain pointed hat, black, for day wear. 3. 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar. 4. 1 winter cloak, black, silver fastenings. Please note that all pupils' clothes should carry name tags. Set books. All students should have a copy of each of the following. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, by Miranda Goshawk. A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot. Magical Theory by Adalbert Waffling. A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration by Emmerich Switch. 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi by Phillida Spore. Magical Draughts and Potions by Arsenius Jigger. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander. The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection by Quentin Trimble. Other equipment. 1 wand, 1 cauldron, pewter, standard size 2, 1 set glass of crystal phials, 1 telescope, 1 set brass scales. Students may bring an owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. Can we buy all this in London? Harry wondered aloud. If you know where to go, said Hagrid.
Harry had never been to London before. Although Hagrid seemed to know where he was going, he was obviously not used to getting there in an ordinary way. He got stuck in the ticket barrier on the Underground and complained loudly that the seats were too small and the trains too slow. "I don't know how the Muggles manage without magic," he said, as they climbed a broken-down escalator which led up to a bustling road lined with shops. Hagrid was so huge that he parted the crowd easily. All Harry had to do was keep close behind him. They passed bookshops and music stores, hamburger bars and cinemas, but nowhere that looked as if it could sell you a magic wand. Could there really be piles of wizard gold buried miles beneath them? Were there really shops that sold spellbooks and broomsticks? Might this not all be some huge joke that the Dursleys had cooked up? If Harry hadn't known that the Dursleys had no sense of humour, he might have thought so. Yet, somehow, even though everything Hagrid had told him so far was unbelievable, Harry couldn't help trusting him. "This is it," Hagrid said, coming to a halt. "The Leaky Cauldron. It's a famous place." It was a tiny, grubby-looking pub. If Hagrid hadn't pointed it out, Harry wouldn't have noticed it was there. The people hurrying by didn't glance at it. Their eyes slid from the big bookshop on one side to the record shop on the other, as if they couldn't see the Leaky Cauldron at all. In fact, Harry had the most peculiar feeling that only he and Hagrid could see it. Before he could mention this, Hagrid had steered him inside. For a famous place, it was very dark and shabby. A few old women were sitting in a corner, drinking tiny glasses of sherry. One of them was smoking a long pipe. A little man in a top hat was talking to the old barman, who was quite bald and looked like a gummy walnut. The low buzz of chatter stopped when they walked in. Everyone seemed to know Hagrid. They waved and smiled at him, and the barman reached for a glass, saying, "The usual, Hagrid?" "Can't, Tom. I'm on Hogwarts business," said Hagrid, clapping his great hand on Harry's shoulder and making Harry's knees buckle. "Good Lord," said the barman, peering at Harry. "Is this... can this be?" The leaky cauldron had suddenly gone completely still and silent. "Bless my soul," whispered the old barman. "Harry Potter! What an honour!" He hurried out from behind the bar, rushed towards Harry, and seized his hand, tears in his eyes. "Welcome back, Mr. Potter. Welcome back." Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone was looking at him. The old woman with the pipe was puffing on it without realizing it had gone out. Hagrid was beaming. Then there was a great scraping of chairs, and next moment, Harry found himself shaking hands with everyone in the leaky cauldron. "Doris Crockford, Mr. Potter. Can't believe I am meeting you at last." "So proud, Mr. Potter. Oh, I'm just so proud." "Always wanted to shake your hand. Oh, I'm all of a flutter." "Delighted, Mr. Potter. Just can't tell you. Diggle's the name. Daedalus Diggle." "I've seen you before," said Harry, as Daedalus Diggle's top hat fell off in his excitement. You bowed to me once in a shop." "He remembers," cried Daedalus Diggle, looking around at everyone. "Do you hear that? He remembers me." Harry shook hands again and again. Doris Crockford kept coming back for more. A pale young man made his way forward, very nervously. One of his eyes was twitching. "Professor Quirrell," said Hagrid. "Harry, Professor Quirrell will be one of your teachers at Hogwarts." "Potter," stammered Professor Quirrell, grasping Harry's hand. "Can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you." "What sort of magic do you teach, Professor Quirrell?" Defense against dark arts," muttered Professor Quirrell, as though he'd rather not think about it. Not that you'll be needing it, eh, Potter?" He laughed nervously. "You'll be getting all your equipment, I suppose? I've got to pick up a new book on vampires myself." He looked terrified at the very thought. But the others wouldn't let Professor Quirrell keep Harry to himself. It took almost 10 minutes to get away from them all. At last, Hagrid managed to make himself heard over the babble. "Must get on, lots to buy. Come on, Harry." Doris Crockford shook Harry's hand one last time, and Hagrid led them through the bar and out into a small walled courtyard, where there was nothing but a dustbin and a few weeds. Hagrid grinned at Harry. "Told you, didn't I? I told you were famous. Even Professor Quirrell was trembling to meet you. Mind you, he's usually trembling." "Is he always that nervous?" "Oh, yeah, poor bloke. Brilliant mind. He was fine while he was studying out of books, but then he took a year off to get some first-hand experience. They say he met with vampires in the Black Forest, and there was a nasty bit of trouble with a hag. Never been the same since. Scared of the students, scared of his own subject. Now, where's my umbrella? Vampires, hags." Harry's head was swimming. Hagrid, meanwhile, was counting bricks in the wall above the dustbin. 3 up, 2 across, he muttered. "Right, stand back, Harry." He tapped the wall 3 times with the point of his umbrella. The brick he had touched quivered. It wriggled in the middle, and a small hole appeared. It grew wider and wider. A second later, they were facing an archway large enough even for Hagrid, an archway onto a cobbled street, which twisted and turned out of sight. "Welcome," said Hagrid, "to Diagon Alley." He grinned at Harry's amazement. They stepped through the archway. Harry looked quickly over his shoulder and saw the archway shrink instantly back into solid wall. The sun shone brightly on a stack of cauldrons outside the nearest shop. Cauldrons, all sizes, copper, brass, pewter, silver, self-stirring, collapsible, said a sign hanging over them. Yeah, you'll be needing one, said Hagrid, but we gotta get your money first. Harry wished he had about 8 more eyes. He turned his head in every direction as they walked up the street, trying to look at everything at once. The shops, the things outside them, the people doing their shopping. A plump woman outside an apothecary was shaking her head as they passed, saying, "Dragon's liver, 16 sickles an ounce. They're mad." A low, soft hooting came from a dark shop with a sign saying, "Aelop's Owl Emporium." Tawny, Screech, Barn, Brown, and Snowy. Several boys of about Harry's age had their noses pressed against a window with broomsticks in it. "Look," Harry heard one of them say, "the new Nimbus 2000, fastest ever." There were shops selling robes, shops selling telescopes, and strange silver instruments Harry had never seen before. Windows stacked with barrels of bat spleens and eel's eyes, tottering piles of spellbooks, quills and rolls of parchment, potion bottles and globes of the moon. "Gringotts," said Hagrid. They had reached a snowy white building which towered over the other little shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors, wearing a uniform of scarlet and gold was, "Yeah, that's a goblin," said Hagrid quietly as they walked up the white stone steps towards him. The goblin was about a head shorter than Harry. He had a swarthy, clever face, and a pointed beard, and Harry noticed very long fingers and feet. He bowed as they walked inside. Now they were facing a second pair of doors, silver this time, with words engraved upon them. "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure there." "Like I said, you'd be mad to try and rob it," said Hagrid. A pair of goblins bowed them through the silver doors, and they were in a vast marble hall. About 100 more goblins were sitting on high stools behind a long counter, scribbling in large ledgers, weighing coins on brass scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. There were too many doors to count leading off the hall, and yet more goblins were showing people in and out of these. Hagrid and Harry made for the counter. "Morning," said Hagrid to a free goblin. "We've come to take some money out of Harry Potter's safe." "You have the key, sir?" "Got it here somewhere," said Hagrid, and he started emptying his pockets onto the counter, scattering a handful of mouldy dog biscuits over the goblin's book of numbers. The goblin wrinkled his nose. Harry watched the goblin on their right, weighing a pile of rubies as big as glowing coals. "Oh, got it," said Hagrid, holding up a tiny golden key. The goblin looked at it closely. "That seems to be in order. Oh, and I've got a letter here from Professor Dumbledore," said Hagrid importantly, throwing out his chest. "It's about the, you-know-what in Vault 713. The goblin read the letter carefully. "Very well," he said, handing it back to Hagrid. "I will have someone take you down to both vaults. Griphook!" Griphook was yet another goblin. Once Hagrid had crammed all the dog biscuits back inside his pockets, he and Harry followed Griphook towards one of the doors leading off the hall. "What's the you-know-what in Vault 713? Harry asked. "Can't tell you that," said Hagrid mysteriously. "Very secret. Hogwarts business. Dumbledore has trusted me. More of my job's worth, I tell you that." Griphook held the door open for them. Harry, who had expected more marble, was surprised. They were in a narrow stone passageway lit with flaming torches. It sloped steeply downwards, and there were little railway tracks on the floor. Griphook whistled, and a small cart came hurtling up the tracks towards them. They climbed in, Hagrid with some more difficulty, and were off. At first, they just hurtled through a maze of twisting passages. Harry tried to remember left, right, left, middle fork, right, left. Oh, but it was impossible. The rattling cart seemed to know its own way, because Griphook wasn't steering. Harry's eyes stung as the cold air rushed past them, but he kept them wide open. Once he thought he saw a burst of fire at the end of a passage and twisted round to see if it was a dragon, but too late. They plunged even deeper, passing an underground lake where huge stalactites and stalagmites grew from the ceiling and floor. "I never know," Harry called to Hagrid over the noise of the cart. "What's the difference between a stalagmite and a stalactite?" "Stalagmite's got an M in it," said Hagrid. "And don't ask me questions just now. I think I'm going to be sick." He did look very green, and when the cart stopped at last beside a small door in the passage wall, Hagrid got out and had to lean against the wall to stop his knees trembling. Griphook unlocked the door. A lot of green smoke came billowing out, and as it cleared, Harry gasped. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze nuts. "All yours," smiled Hagrid. All Harry's. It was incredible. The Dursleys couldn't have known about this, or they'd have had it from him faster than blinking. How often they had complained how much Harry cost them to keep, and all the time there had been a small fortune belonging to him buried deep under London. Hagrid helped Harry pile some of it into a bag. "The gold ones are galleons," he explained. 17 silver sickles to a galleon and 29 nuts to a sickle. It's easy enough. Right, that should be enough for a couple of terms. We'll keep the rest safe for you." He turned to Griphook. "Vault 713 now, please. And can we go more slowly?" "One speed only," said Griphook. They were going even deeper now and gathering speed. The air became colder and colder as they hurtled round tight corners. They went rattling over an underground ravine. Harry leant over the side to try and see what was down at the dark bottom, but Hagrid groaned and pulled him back by the scruff of his neck. Vault 713 had no keyhole. "Stand back," said Griphook importantly. He stroked the door gently with one of his long fingers, and it simply melted away. "If anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried that, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped in there," said Griphook. "How often do you check to see if anyone's inside?" Harry asked. "About once every 10 years, said Griphook with a rather nasty grin. Something really extraordinary had to be inside this top security vault, Harry was sure, and he leant forward, eagerly expecting to see fabulous jewels at the very least. But at first, he thought it was empty. Then he noticed a grubby little package wrapped in brown paper lying on the floor. Hagrid picked it up and tucked it deep inside his coat. Harry longed to know what it was, but knew better than to ask. "Come on, back into this infernal cart, and don't talk to me on the way back. It's best if I keep my mouth shut," said Hagrid.
One wild cart ride later, they stood blinking in the sunlight outside Gringotts. Harry didn't know where to run first now that he had a bag full of money. He didn't have to know how many gallons there were to a pound to know that he was holding more money than he'd had in his whole life. More money than even Dudley had ever had. "Might as well get your uniform," said Hagrid, nodding toward Madame Malcolm's robes for all occasions. Listen, Harry, would you mind if I slip off for a pick-me-up in the leaky cauldron? I hate them Gringotts carts. He did still look a bit sick, so Harry entered Madame Malkin's shop alone, feeling nervous. Madame Malkin was a squat, smiling witch dressed all in mauve. "Hogwarts, dear," she said when Harry started to speak. "Got the lot here. Another young man being fitted up just now, in fact." In the back of the shop, a boy with a pale, pointed face was standing on a footstool while a second witch pinned up his long black robes. Madame Malkin stood Harry on a stool next to him, slipping a long robe over his head, and began to pin it to the right length. "Hello," said the boy. "Hogwarts too?" "Yes," said Harry. "My father's next door buying my books, and mother's up the street looking at wands," said the boy. He had a bored, drawling voice. "Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one, and I'll smuggle it in somehow." Harry was strongly reminded of Dudley. "Have you got your own broom?" the boy went on. "No," said Harry. "Play Quidditch at all?" "No," Harry said again, wondering what on earth Quidditch could be. "I do. Father says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house, and I must say I agree. Know what house you'll be in yet?" "No," said Harry, feeling more stupid by the minute. "Well, no one really knows until they get there, do they? But I know I'll be in Slytherin. All our family have been. Imagine being in Hufflepuff. I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Said Harry, wishing he could say something a bit more interesting. "I say, look at that man," said the boy suddenly, nodding toward the front window. Hagrid was standing there, grinning at Harry and pointing at 2 large ice creams to show he couldn't come in. "That's Hagrid," said Harry, pleased to know something the boy didn't. "He works at Hogwarts." "Oh," said the boy, "I've heard of him. He's sort of a servant, isn't he?" "He's the gamekeeper," said Harry. He was liking the boy less and less every second. "Yes, exactly. I heard he's just sort of savage. Lives in a hut on the school grounds, and every now and then he gets drunk, tries to do magic, and ends up setting fire to his bed." "I think he's brilliant," said Harry coldly. "Do you?" said the boy with a slight sneer. "Why is he with you? Where are your parents?" "They're dead," said Harry shortly. He didn't feel much like going into the matter with this boy. "Oh, sorry," said the other, not sounding sorry at all. "But they were, kind, weren't they?" "They were a witch and wizard, if that's what you mean." "I really don't think they should let the other sort in, do you? They're just not the same. They've never been brought up to know our ways. Some of them have never even heard of Hogwarts until they get the letter, imagine. I think they should keep it in the old wizarding families. What's your surname, anyway?" But before Harry could answer, Madame Malkin said, "That's you done, my dear?" And Harry, not sorry for an excuse to stop talking to the boy, hopped down from the footstool. "Well, I'll see you at Hogwarts, I suppose," said the drawling boy. Harry was rather quiet as he ate the ice cream Hagrid had bought him, chocolate and raspberry with chopped nuts. "What's up?" said Hagrid. "Nothing," Harry lied. They stopped to buy parchment and quills. Harry cheered up a bit when he found a bottle of ink that changed colour as he wrote. When they left the shop, he said, "Hagrid, what's Quidditch?" "Blimey, Harry, I keep forgetting how little you know. Not known about Quidditch." "Don't make me feel worse," said Harry. He told Hagrid about the pale boy in Madame Malkin's. "And he said people from Muggle families shouldn't even be allowed in." "You're not from a Muggle family. If he'd known who you were, he's grown up knowing your name if his parents are wizarding folk. You saw what everyone in the Leaky Cauldron was like when they saw you. Anyway, what does he know about it? Some of the best I ever saw were the only ones with magic in them in a long line of Muggles. That was your mum. Look what she had for a sister." "So what is Quidditch?" "It's our sport, wizard sport. It's like soccer in the Muggle world. Everyone follows Quidditch. Played up in the air on broomsticks, and there's 4 balls. Sort of hard to explain the rules." "And what are Slytherin and Hufflepuff?" "Schoolhouses. There's 4. Everyone says Hufflepuff for a lot of duffers, but I bet I meant Hufflepuff," Harry said gloomily. "Better Hufflepuff than Slytherin," said Hagrid darkly. "There is not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. You know who was one." "But
I'm in
sorry,
Slytherin.
you know who was at Hogwarts?" Years and years ago, said Hagrid. They bought Harry's school books in a shop called Flourish and Blots, where the shelves were stacked to the ceiling with books as large as paving stones bound in leather. Books the size of postage stamps and covers of silk, books full of peculiar symbols, and a few books with nothing in them at all. Even Dudley, who never read anything, would have been wild to get his hands on some of these. Hagrid almost had to drag Harry away from curses and counter-curses, bewitch your friends and befuddle your enemies with the latest revenges, hair loss, jelly legs, tongue-tying, and much, much more. By Professor Vindictus Viridian. I was trying to find out how to curse Dudley. I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but you're not to use magic in the Muggle world except in very special circumstances, said Hagrid. And anyway, you couldn't work any of those curses yet. You'll need a lot more study before you get to that level. Hagrid wouldn't let Harry buy a solid gold cauldron either. It says pewter on your list. But they got a nice set of scales for weighing potion ingredients and a collapsible brass telescope. Then they visited the apothecary, which was fascinating enough to make up for its horrible smell, a mixture of bad eggs and rotted cabbages. Barrels of slimy stuff stood on the floor, jars of herbs, dried roots, and bright powders lined the walls. Bundles of feathers, strings of fangs, and snarled claws hung from the ceiling. While Hagrid asked the man behind the counter for a supply of some basic potion ingredients for Harry, Harry himself examined silver unicorn horns at 21 galleons each, and minuscule glittery black beetle eyes, 5 knots a scoop. Outside the apothecary, Hagrid checked Harry's list again. Just your wand left. Oh yeah, and I still haven't got you a birthday present. Harry felt himself go red. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. Tell you what, I'll get your animal. Not a toad. Toads went out of fashion years ago. You'd be laughed at. And I don't like cats. They make me sneeze. I'll get you an owl. All the kids want owls. They're dead useful. Carry your mail and everything. 20 minutes later, they left Aelop's Owl Emporium, which had been dark and full of rustling and flickering jewel-bright eyes. Harry now carried a large cage that held a beautiful snowy owl, fast asleep with her head under her wing. He couldn't stop stammering his thanks, sounding just like Professor Quirrell. Don't mention it, said Hagrid gruffly. Don't expect you've had a lot of presents from them Dursleys. Just Ollivanders left now. Only place for wands, Ollivanders, and you gotta have the best wand. A magic wand. This was what Harry had been really looking forward to. The last shop was narrow and shabby. Peeling gold letters over the door read, Ollivanders, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. A single wand lay on a faded purple cushion in the dusky window. A tinkling bell rang somewhere in the depths of the shop as they stepped inside. It was a tiny place, empty except for a single spindly chair that Hagrid sat on to wait. Harry felt strangely as though he had entered a very strict library. He swallowed a lot of new questions that had just occurred to him and looked instead at the thousands of narrow boxes piled neatly right up to the ceiling. For some reason, the back of his neck prickled. The very dust and silence in here seemed to tingle with some secret magic. Good afternoon, said a soft voice. Harry jumped. Hagrid must have jumped too, because there was a loud crunching noise, and he got quickly off the spindly chair. An old man was standing before them, his wide, pale eyes shining like moons through the gloom of the shop. Hello, said Harry awkwardly. Ah, yes, said the man. Yes, I thought I'd be seeing you soon. Harry Potter? It wasn't a question. You have your mother's eyes. It seems only yesterday she was in here herself buying her first wand, 10 1/4 inches long, so she, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work. Mr. Ollivander moved closer to Harry. Harry wished he would blink. Those silvery eyes were a bit creepy. Your father, on the other hand, favoured a mahogany wand, 11 inches, pliable, little more power, and excellent for transfiguration. Well, I say your father favoured it. It's really the one that chooses the wizard, of course. Mr. Ollivander had come so close that he and Harry were almost nose to nose. Harry could see himself reflected in those misty eyes. And that's where... Mr. Ollivander touched the lightning scar on Harry's forehead with a long white finger. I'm sorry to say I sold the one that did it to you softly.
Excuse me.
13.5 inches. You, powerful wand, very powerful, and in the wrong hands, well. If I'd known what that wand was going out into the world to do. He shook his head, and then to Harry's relief spotted Hagrid. Rubeus! Rubeus Hagrid, how nice to see you again. Oak, 16 inches, rather bendy, wasn't it? It was, sir, yes, said Hagrid. Good wand, that one. But I suppose they snapped it in half when you got expelled, said Mr. Ollivander, suddenly stern. Yes, they did, yes, said Hagrid, shuffling his feet. Still got the pieces, though, he added brightly. But you don't use them, said Mr. Ollivander sharply. Oh, no, sir, said Hagrid quickly. Harry noticed he gripped his pink umbrella very tightly as he spoke. Said Mr. Ollivander, giving Hagrid a piercing look. Well now, Mr. Potter, let me see. He pulled a long tape measure with silver markings out of his pocket. Which is your wand arm? Well, I'm right-handed, said Harry. Hold out your arm, that's it. He measured Harry from shoulder to finger, then wrist to elbow, shoulder to floor, knee to armpit, and round his head. As he measured, he said, Every Ollivander wand has a core of powerful magical substance, Mr. Potter. We use unicorn hairs, phoenix tail feathers, and the heartstrings of dragons. No two Ollivander wands are the same, just as no two unicorns, dragons, or phoenixes are quite the same. And, of course, you would never get such good results with another wizard's wand. Harry suddenly realized that the tape measure, which was measuring between his nostrils, was doing this on its own. Mr. Ollivander was flitting around the shelves, taking down boxes. That will do, he said, and the tape measure crumpled into a heap on the floor. Right, then, Mr. Potter, try this one. Beechwood and dragon heartstring, 9 inches, nice and flexible. Just take it and give it a wave. Harry took the wand and, feeling foolish, waved it around a bit. But Mr. Ollivander snatched it out of his hand almost at once. Maple and phoenix feather, 7 inches, quite whippy. Try. Harry tried. He had hardly raised the wand when it too was snatched back by Mr. Ollivander. No, here, ebony and unicorn hair, 8.5 inches, springy. Go on, try it out. Harry tried. And tried. He had no idea what Mr. Ollivander was waiting for. The pile of tried wands was mounting higher and higher on the spindly chair, but the more wands Mr. Ollivander pulled from the shelves, the happier he seemed to become. Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry, we'll find the perfect match here somewhere. I wonder now. Yes, why not? Unusual combination. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. Harry took the wand. He felt a sudden warmth in his fingers. He raised the wand above his head, brought it swishing down through the dusty air, and a stream of red and gold sparks shot from the end like a firework, throwing dancing spots of light onto the walls. Hagrid whooped and clapped, and Mr. Ollivander cried, Oh, bravo, yes, indeed, oh, very good. Well, how curious, how very curious. He put Harry's wand back into its box and wrapped it in brown paper, still muttering, Curious, curious. Sorry, said Harry, but what's curious? Mr. Ollivander fixed Harry with his pale stare. I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand gave another feather. Just one other. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother, its brother gave you that scar. Harry swallowed. Yes, 13.5 inches. You? Curious indeed how these things happen. The wand chooses the wizard, remember? I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great. Harry shivered. He wasn't sure he liked Mr. Ollivander too much. He paid 7 gold galleons for his wand, and Mr. Ollivander bowed them from his shop. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky as Harry and Hagrid made their way back down Diagon Alley, back through the wall, back through the leaky cauldron, now empty. Harry didn't speak at all as they walked down the road. He didn't even notice how much people were gawking at them on the underground, laden as they were with all their funny-shaped packages, with the snowy owl asleep in its cage on Harry's lap. Up another escalator, out into Paddington Station, Harry only realised where they were when Hagrid tapped him on the shoulder. "Got time for a bite to eat before your train leaves," he said. He bought Harry a hamburger and they sat down on plastic seats to eat them. Harry kept looking around. Everything looked so strange somehow. "You all right, Harry? You're very quiet," said Hagrid. Harry wasn't sure he could explain. He'd just had the best birthday of his life. And yet, he chewed his hamburger trying to find the words. "Everyone thinks I'm special," he said at last. "All those people in the leaky cauldron, Professor Quirrell, Mr. Ollivander. But I don't know anything about magic at all. How can they expect great things? I'm famous and I can't even remember what I was famous for. I don't know what happened when the night my parents died." Hagrid leaned across the table. Behind the wild beard and eyebrows, he wore a very kind smile. "Don't you worry, Harry. You'll learn fast enough. Everyone starts at the beginning at Hogwarts. You'll be just fine. Just be yourself. I know it's hard. You've been singled out, and that's always hard. But you'll have a great time at Hogwarts. I did. Still do, as a matter of fact." Hagrid helped Harry onto the train that would take him back to the Dursleys, then handed him an envelope. "Your ticket for Hogwarts," he said. "1st of September, King's Cross. It's all on your ticket. Any problems with the Dursleys, send me a letter with your owl. She'll know where to find me. See you soon, Harry." The train pulled out of the station. Harry wanted to watch Hagrid until he was out of sight. He rose in his seat and pressed his nose against the window, but he blinked, and Hagrid had gone.
might not know me. In case you don't, my name's Jamie Parker. I played Harry in the first stage cast of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. And I'm here to get us cracking on the next chapter of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Hi, my name is James Romney, and I play Albus Potter in Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on Broadway. And today, I'll be reading as Harry.
And I'm reading Vernon Dursley.
I will be reading Mrs. Weasley.
I'm going to be reading Fred Weasley.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm playing George Weasley.
And I'll be reading Ronald Weasley.
I'll be reading Percy Weasley.
I'm reading Virginie.
And I am reading a Hogwarts student.
I will be reading Neville's grandmother.
And today I'll be reading the role of Neville Longbottom.
I am going to read from Trelawney.
Today I'm reading Hermione.
And I'll be reading Draco Malfoy.
Today I will be reading Hagrid.
And I will be reading the train announcement.
Today I'll be reading the back of the chocolate frog card that Harry and Ron read on the Hogwarts Express.
We're going to be doing chapter 6, which is The Journey from Platform 9 and 3/4. Harry's last month with the Dursleys wasn't fun. True, Dudley was now so scared of Harry he wouldn't stay in the same room, while Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon didn't shut Harry in his cupboard, force him to do anything, or shout at him. In fact, they didn't speak to him at all. Half terrified, half furious, they acted as though any chair with Harry in it was empty. Although this was an improvement in many ways, it did become a bit depressing after a while. Harry kept to his room with his new owl for company. He had decided to call her Hedwig, a name he had found in A History of Magic. His school books were very interesting. He lay on his bed, reading late into the night, Hedwig swooping in and out of the open window as she pleased. It was lucky that Aunt Petunia didn't come into Hoover anymore, because Hedwig kept bringing back dead mice. And every night, before he went to sleep, Harry ticked off another day on the piece of paper he had pinned to the wall, counting down to September the 1st. On the last day of August, he thought he'd better speak to his aunt and uncle about getting to King's Cross Station next day. So he went down to the living room, where they were watching a quiz show on television. He cleared his throat to let them know he was there, and Dudley screamed and ran from the room.
Uncle Vernon?
Uncle Vernon grunted to show he was listening.
I need to be at King's Cross tomorrow to go to Hogwarts.
Uncle Vernon grunted again.
Would it be all right if you gave me a lift?
Grunt. Harry supposed that meant yes.
Thank you.
He was about to go back upstairs when Uncle Vernon actually spoke.
Funny way to get to a wizard's school, the train. Magic carpets all got punctures, have they?
Harry didn't say anything.
Where's the school anyway?
I don't know,
said Harry, realizing this for the first time. He pulled the ticket Hagrid had given him out of his pocket.
I just take the train from platform 9 3/4 at 11 o'clock.
He read. His aunt and uncle stared.
Platform what?
9 3/4.
Don't talk rubbish,
said Uncle Vernon.
There's no platform 9 3/4.
It's on my ticket.
Barking,
said Uncle Vernon.
Howling mad, the lot of them. You'll see, you just wait. All right. We'll take you to King's Cross. We're going up to London tomorrow anyway. Or I wouldn't bother.
Why are you going to London?
Harry asked, trying to keep things friendly.
Taking Dudley to the hospital,
growled Uncle Vernon.
Got to have that ruddy tail removed before he goes to Smeltings.
Harry woke at 5 o'clock the next morning and was too excited and nervous to go back to sleep. He got up and pulled on his jeans because he didn't want to walk into the station in his wizard's robes. He'd change on the train. He checked his Hogwarts list yet again to make sure he had everything he needed, saw that Hedwig was shut safely in her cage, and then paced the room, waiting for the Dursleys to get up. 2 hours later, Harry's huge, heavy trunk had been loaded into the Dursleys' car. Aunt Petunia had talked Dudley into sitting next to Harry, and they had set off. They reached King's Cross at 10:30. Uncle Vernon dumped Harry's trunk onto a trolley and wheeled it into the station for him. Harry thought this was strangely kind. Until Uncle Vernon stopped dead, facing the platforms, with a nasty grin on his face.
Well, there you are, boy. Platform 9, platform 10. Your platform should be somewhere in the middle. They don't seem to have built it yet, do they?
He was quite right, of course. There was a big plastic number 9 over one platform and a big plastic number 10 over the one next to it, and in the middle, nothing at all.
Have a good term,
said Uncle Vernon, with an even nastier smile. He left without another word. Harry turned and saw the Dursleys drive away. All three of them were laughing. Harry's mouth went rather dry. What on earth was he going to do? He was starting to attract a lot of funny looks because of Hedwig. He'd have to ask someone. He stopped a passing guard, but didn't dare mention platform 9 3/4. The guard had never heard of Hogwarts, and when Harry couldn't even tell him what part of the country it was in, he started to get annoyed, as though Harry was being stupid on purpose. Getting desperate, Harry asked for the train that left at 11 o'clock, but the guard said there wasn't one. In the end, the guard strode away, muttering about time wasters. Harry was now trying hard not to panic. According to the large clock over the arrivals board, he had 10 minutes left to get on the train to Hogwarts, and he had no idea how to do it. He was stranded in the middle of a station with a trunk he could barely lift, a pocket full of wizard money, and a large owl. Hagrid must have forgotten to tell him something you had to do, like tapping the third brick on the left to get into Diagon Alley. He wondered if he should get out his wand and start tapping the ticket box between platforms 9 and 10. At that moment, a group of people passed just behind him, and he caught a few words of what they were saying.
Packed with muggles, of course.
Harry swung round. The speaker was a plump woman who was talking to 4 boys, all with flaming red hair. Each of them was pushing a trunk like Harry's in front of him, and they had an owl. Heart hammering, Harry pushed his trolley after them. They stopped, and so did he, just near enough to hear what they were saying.
Now, what's the platform number?
Said the boy's mother.
9 3/4.
Piped a small girl, also red-headed, who was holding her hand.
Mum, can't I go? You're not old enough, Ginny. Now be quiet. All right, Percy, you go first.
What looked like the oldest boy marched towards platforms 9 and 10. Harry watched, careful not to blink in case he missed it. But just as the boy reached the divide between the 2 platforms, a large crowd of tourists came swarming in front of him, and by the time the last rucksack had cleared away, the boy had vanished.
Fred, you next.
The plump woman said.
I'm not Fred, I'm George.
Said the boy.
Honestly, woman, you call yourself our mother? Can't you tell I'm George?
Sorry, George, dear.
Only joking. I am Fred.
Said the boy, and off he went. His twin called after him to hurry up, and he must have done, because a second later, he had gone. But how had he done it? Now, the third brother was walking briskly towards the ticket barrier. He was almost there, and then, quite suddenly, he wasn't anywhere. There was nothing else for it.
Excuse me,
Harry said to the plump woman.
Hello, dear.
She said.
First time at Hogwarts. Ron's new too.
She pointed at the last and youngest of her sons. He was tall, thin and gangling, with freckles and big hands and feet and a long nose.
Yes. The thing is, I don't know how to...
How to get on the platform,
she said kindly, and Harry nodded.
Not to worry,
she said.
All you have to do is walk straight to the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Don't stop and don't be scared you'll crash into it. That's very important. Best to do it at a bit of a run if you're nervous. Go on. Go now before Ron.
Okay,
said Harry. He pushed his trolley round and stared at the barrier. It looked very solid. He started to walk towards it. People jostled him on their way to platforms 9 and 10. Harry walked more quickly. He was going to smash right into that ticket box, and then he'd be in trouble. Leaning forward on his trolley, he broke into a heavy run. The barrier was coming nearer and nearer. He wouldn't be able to stop. The trolley was out of control. He was a foot away. He closed his eyes, ready for the crash. And it didn't come. He kept on running. He opened his eyes. A scarlet steam engine was waiting next to a platform packed with people. A sign overhead said, Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock. Harry looked behind him and saw a wrought iron archway where the ticket box had been, with the words Platform 9 3/4 on it. He had done it. Smoke from the engine drifted over the heads of the chattering crowd, while cats of every colour wound here and there between their legs. Owls hooted to each other in a disgruntled sort of way over the babble and the scraping of heavy trunks. The first few carriages were already packed with students, some hanging out of the window to talk to their families, some fighting over seats. Harry pushed his trolley off down the platform in search of an empty seat. He passed a round-faced boy who was saying,
Gran, I've lost my toad again.
Oh, Neville.
He heard the old woman sigh. A boy with dreadlocks was surrounded by a small crowd.
Give us a look, Lee. Go on.
The boy lifted the lid of a box in his arms, and the people around him shrieked and yelled as something inside poked out a long, hairy leg. Harry pressed on through the crowd until he found an empty compartment near the end of the train. He put Hedwig inside first, and then started to shove and heave his trunk towards the train door. He tried to lift it up the steps, but could hardly raise one end, and twice he dropped it painfully on his foot.
Want a hand?
It was one of the red-haired twins he'd followed through the ticket box.
Yes, please.
Harry panted.
Oi, Fred, come here and help.
And with the twins' help, Harry's trunk was at last tucked away in a corner of the compartment.
Thanks,
said Harry, pushing his sweaty hair out of his eyes.
What's that?
Said one of the twins suddenly, pointing at Harry's lightning scar.
Blimey,
said the other twin.
Are you...
He is,
said the first twin.
aren't you?
He added to Harry.
What?
Said Harry.
Harry Potter!
Chorused the twins.
Oh, him.
Said Harry.
I mean, yes, I am.
The two boys gawped at him, and Harry felt himself going red. Then, to his relief, a voice came floating in through the train's open door.
Fred? George? Are you there?
Coming, Mum!
And with a last look at Harry, the twins hopped off the train. Harry sat down next to the window, where, half hidden, he could watch the red-haired family on the platform and hear what they were saying. The mother had just taken out her handkerchief.
Ron, you've got something on your nose.
The youngest boy tried to jerk out of the way, but she grabbed him and began rubbing the end of his nose.
Mum, get off!
He wriggled free.
Oh, has Uncle Ronnie got something on his nosy?
Said one of the twins.
Shut up,
said Ron.
Where's Percy?
Said their mother.
He's coming now.
The oldest boy came striding into sight. He had already changed into his billowing black Hogwarts robes, and Harry noticed a shiny red and gold badge on his chest with the letter P on it.
Can't stay long, Mother,
he said.
I'm up front. The prefects have got 2 compartments to themselves.
Oh, are you a prefect, Percy?
Said one of the twins, with an air of great surprise.
You should have said something. We had no idea.
Hang on. I think I remember him saying something about it.
Said the other twin.
Once.
Or twice.
A minute.
All summer.
Oh, shut up,
said Percy the prefect.
How come Percy gets new robes anyway?
Said one of the twins.
Because he's a prefect.
Said their mother fondly.
All right, dear. Well, have a good term. Send me an owl when you get there.
She kissed Percy on the cheek, and he left. Then she turned to the twins.
Now, you two, this year, you behave yourselves. If I get one more owl telling me you've blown up a toilet or...
What, blown up a toilet? We've never blown up a toilet.
Great idea, though. Thanks, Mum.
It's not funny. And look after Ron.
Don't worry. Ickle Runnykins is safe with us.
Shut up,
said Ron again. He was almost as tall as the twins already, and his nose was still pink where his mother had rubbed it.
Hey, Mum, guess what? Guess who we just met on the train?
Harry leant back quickly so that they couldn't see him looking.
You know that black-haired boy who was near us in the station? Know who he is?
Who?
Harry Potter.
Harry heard the little girl's voice.
Oh, Mum, can
Can I go on the train and see him, Mama? Oh, please.
You've already seen him, Ginny, and the poor boy isn't something you goggle at in a zoo. Is he really, Fred? How do you know?
Ask them. Saw his scar. It's really there, like lightning.
Oh, poor dear. No wonder he was alone. I wondered. He was ever so polite when he asked how to get onto the platform.
Well, never mind that. Do you think he knows what you know who looks like?
Their mother suddenly became very stern.
I forbid you to ask him, Fred. No, don't you dare. As though he needs reminding of that on his first day of school.
All right, keep your hair on.
A whistle sounded,
Hurry up.
said their mother, and the three boys clambered onto the train. They leant out of the window for her to kiss them goodbye, and their younger sister began to cry.
Don't, Ginny. We'll send you loads of owls.
We'll send you a Hogwarts toilet seat.
George!
Only joking, Mum.
The train began to move. Harry saw the boy's mother waving, and their sister, half laughing, half crying, running to keep up with the train until it gathered too much speed. Then she fell back and waved. Harry watched the girl and her mother disappear as the train rounded the corner. Houses flashed past the window. Harry felt a great leap of excitement. He didn't know what he was going to, but it had to be better than what he was leaving behind. The door of the compartment slid open, and the youngest red-headed boy came in.
Anyone sitting there?
He asked, pointing at the seat opposite Harry.
Everywhere else is full.
Harry shook his head, and the boy sat down. He glanced at Harry, and then looked quickly out of the window, pretending he hadn't looked. Harry saw he still had a black mark on his nose.
Hey, Ron.
The twins were back.
Listen, we're going down the middle of the train. Lee Jordan's got a giant tarantula down there.
Right,
mumbled Ron.
Harry,
said the other twin.
Did we introduce ourselves? Fred and George Weasley. And this is Ron, our brother. See you later then.
Bye,
said Harry and Ron. The twins slid the compartment door shut behind them.
Are you really Harry Potter?
Ron blurted out. Harry nodded.
Oh, well, I thought it might be one of Fred and George's jokes,
said Ron.
Have you really got,
He pointed at Harry's forehead. Harry pulled back his fringe to show the lightning scar. Ron stared.
So that's where you know who?
Yes,
said Harry.
but I can't remember it.
Nothing,
said Ron eagerly.
Well, I remember a lot of green light, but nothing else.
Wow,
said Ron. He sat and stared at Harry for a few moments. And then, as though he'd suddenly realised what he was doing, he looked quickly out of the window again.
Are all your family wizards?
Asked Harry, who found Ron just as interesting as Ron found him.
Yes, I think so,
said Ron.
I think Mum's got a second cousin who's an accountant, but we never talk about him.
So you must know loads of magic already.
The Weasleys were clearly one of those old wizarding families the Pale Boy and Diagon Alley had talked about.
I heard you went to live with Muggles,
said Ron.
What are they like?
Horrible. Well, not all of them. My aunt and uncle and cousin are, though. Wish I'd had 3 wizard brothers.
5,
said Ron. For some reason, he was looking gloomy.
I'm the 6th in our family to go to Hogwarts. Could say I've got a lot to live up to. Bill and Charlie have already left. Bill was head boy, and Charlie was captain of Quidditch. But now Percy's a prefect. Yeah, Fred and George mess around a lot, but they still get really good marks, and everyone thinks they're really funny. Everyone expects me to do as well as the others, but if I do, it's no big deal because I did it first. You never get anything new either with 5 brothers. I've got Bill's old robes, Charlie's old wand, and Percy's old rat.
Ron reached inside his jacket and pulled out a fat grey rat, which was asleep.
His name's Scabbers, and he's useless. He hardly ever wakes up. Percy got an owl from my dad for being made a prefect, but they couldn't have... I got Scabbers instead.
Ron's ears went pink. He seemed to think he'd said too much because he went back to staring out of the window. Harry didn't think there was anything wrong with not being able to afford an owl. After all, he'd never had any money in his life until a month ago, and he told Ron so. All about having to wear Dudley's old clothes and never getting proper birthday presents. This seemed to cheer Ron up.
And until Hagrid told me, I didn't know anything about being a wizard, or about my parents, or Voldemort.
Ron gasped.
What?
Said Harry.
You said you know whose name?
Said Ron, sounding both shocked and impressed.
I'd have thought you, of all people.
I'm not trying to be brave or anything, just saying the name.
Said Harry.
I just never knew you shouldn't. See what I mean? I've got loads to learn. I bet.
He added, voicing for the first time something that had been worrying him a lot lately.
I bet I'm the worst in the class.
You won't be. There's loads of people that come from Muggle families, and they learn quick enough.
While they'd been talking, the train had carried them out of London. Now they were speeding past fields full of cows and sheep. They were quiet for a time, watching the fields and the lanes flick past. Around 12:30, there was a great clattering outside in the corridor, and a smiling, dimpled woman slid back their door and said,
Anything off the cart, dears?
Harry, who hadn't had any breakfast, leapt to his feet. But Ron's ears went pink again, and he muttered that he'd brought sandwiches. Harry went out into the corridor. He had never had any money for sweets with the Dursleys, and now that he had pockets rattling with gold and silver, he was ready to buy as many Mars bars as he could carry. But the woman didn't have Mars bars. What she did have were Bertie Bott's every flavour beans, Drooble's best blowing gum, chocolate frogs, pumpkin pasties, cauldron cakes, licorice wands, and a number of other strange things Harry had never seen in his life. Not wanting to miss anything, he got some of everything and paid the woman 11 silver sickles and 7 bronze knuts. Ron stared as Harry brought it all back into the compartment and tipped it onto an empty seat.
Hungry, are you?
Starving,
said Harry, taking a large bite out of a pumpkin pasty. Ron had taken out a lumpy package and unwrapped it. There were 4 sandwiches in there. He pulled one of them apart and said,
She always forgets I don't like corned beef.
Swap you for one of these,
said Harry, holding up a pasty.
Go on.
You don't want this. It's all dry,
said Ron.
She hasn't got much time,
he added quickly.
You know, 5 of us.
Go on. Have a pasty,
said Harry, who had never had anything to share before, or indeed anyone to share it with. It was a nice feeling, sitting there with Ron, eating their way through all Harry's pasties and cakes. The sandwiches lay forgotten.
What are these?
Harry asked Ron, holding up a pack of chocolate frogs.
They're not really frogs, are they?
He was starting to feel that nothing would surprise him.
No,
said Ron.
Well, see where the card is? I'm missing a gripper.
What?
Oh, of course, you wouldn't know. Chocolate frogs have cards inside them. You know, they're to collect. Famous witches and wizards. I've got about 500, but I haven't got a gripper or Ptolemy.
Harry unwrapped his chocolate frog and picked up the card. It showed a man's face. He wore half-moon glasses, had a long, crooked nose, and flowing silver hair, beard, and moustache. Underneath the picture was the name Albus Dumbledore.
So this is Dumbledore,
said Harry.
Don't tell me you never heard of Dumbledore,
said Ron.
Well, can I have a frog? I might get a gripper. Thanks.
Harry turned over his card and read,
Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts. Considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times, Professor Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling.
Harry turned the card back over and saw, to his astonishment, that Dumbledore's face had disappeared.
He's gone.
Well, you can't expect him to hang around all day,
said Ron.
He'll be back. No, I've got Morgana again. I've got about 6 of her. Do you want it? Well, you can start collecting.
Ron's eyes strayed to the pile of chocolate frogs waiting to be unwrapped.
Help yourself,
said Harry.
But in, the Muggle world, people just stay put in photos.
Do they? What, they don't move at all?
Ron sounded amazed.
Weird.
Harry stared as Dumbledore sidled back into the picture on his card and gave him a small smile. Ron was more interested in eating the frogs than looking at the famous witches and wizards cards, but Harry couldn't keep his eyes off them. Soon he had not only Dumbledore and Morgana, but Hengist of Woodcraft, Alberic Grunion, Circe, Paracelsus, and Merlin. He finally tore his eyes away from the druidess Cleodna, who was scratching her nose, to open a bag of Bertie Bott's every flavour beans.
Oh, you want to be careful with those,
Ron warned Harry.
When they say every flavour, they mean every flavour. You know, you get all the ordinary ones like chocolate, peppermint and marmalade. But then you get spinach and liver and tripe. George reckons he got a bogey flavour one once.
Ron picked up a green bean, looked at it carefully and bit into a corner.
See? Sprouts.
They had a good time eating the every flavour beans. Harry got toast, coconut, baked bean, strawberry, curry, grass, coffee, sardine, and was even brave enough to nibble the end off a funny grey one Ron wouldn't touch, which turned out to be pepper. The countryside, now flying past the window, was becoming wilder. The neat fields had gone. Now there were woods, twisting rivers, and dark green hills. There was a knock on the door of their compartment, and the round-faced boy Harry had passed on platform 9 3/4 came in. He looked tearful.
Sorry,
he said.
But have you seen a toad at all?
When they shook their heads, he wailed,
Oh, I've lost him. He keeps getting away from me. He'll turn up,
said Harry.
Yes,
said the boy miserably.
Well, if you see him.
He left.
Don't know why he's so bothered,
said Ron.
If I brought a toad, I'd lose it as quick as I could. Mind you, I brought Scabbers, so I can't talk.
The rat was still snoozing on Ron's lap.
He might have died and you wouldn't know the difference,
said Ron in disgust.
I tried to turn him yellow yesterday to make him more interesting. The spell didn't work. I'll show you, look.
He rummaged around in his trunk and pulled out a very battered-looking wand. It was chipped in places and something white was glinting at the end.
Unicorn hairs nearly poking out. Anyway,
he had just raised his wand when the compartment door slid open again. The toadless boy was back, but this time he had a girl with him. She was already wearing her new Hogwarts robes.
Has anyone seen a toad? Neville's lost one,
she said. She had a bossy sort of voice, lots of bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth.
We've already told him we haven't seen it.
But the girl wasn't listening. She was looking at the wand in his hand.
Oh, are you doing magic? Let's see it then.
She sat down. Ron looked taken aback.
Oh. All right.
He cleared his throat.
Sunshine, daisies, butter mellow, turn this stupid fat rat yellow.
He waved his wand, but nothing happened. Scabbers stayed grey and fast asleep.
Are you sure that's a real spell?
Said the girl.
Well, it's not very good, is it? I've tried a few simple spells just for practice, and it's all worked for me. Nobody in my family's magic at all. It was ever such a surprise when I got my letter, but I was ever so pleased, of course. I mean, it's the very best school of witchcraft there is, I've heard. I've learnt all our course books by heart, of course. I just hope it will be enough. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. Who are you?
She said all of this very fast. Harry looked at Ron and was relieved to see by his stunned face that he hadn't learned all the set books off by heart either.
I'm Ron Weasley,
Ron muttered.
Harry Potter,
said Harry.
Are you? Really?
Said Hermione.
I know all about you, of course. I got a few extra books for background reading, and you're in Modern Magical History and The Rise and Fall of the Dark Arts and Great Wizarding Events of the 20th Century.
Am I?
Said Harry, feeling dazed.
Goodness! Didn't you know? I'd have found out everything I could if it was me,
said Hermione.
Do either of you know what house you'll be in? I've been asking around, and I hope I'm in Gryffindor. It sounds by far the best. I hear Dumbledore himself was in it, but I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. Anyway, we'd You'd better go and look for Neville's toad. You two had better change. You know, I expect we'll be there soon.
And she left, taking the toadless boy with her,
Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it.
said Ron. He threw his wand back into his trunk.
Stupid spell. George gave it to me. Bet he knew it was a dud.
What house are your brothers in?
Asked Harry.
Gryffindor,
said Ron. Gloom seemed to be settling on him again.
Mum and Dad were in it too. Don't know what they'll say if I'm not. I don't suppose Ravenclaw would be too bad. Imagine if they put me in Slytherin.
That's the house I mean, you know who was in.
Yeah,
said Ron. He flopped back into his seat, looking depressed.
You know, I think the ends of Scabbers' whiskers are a bit lighter,
said Harry, trying to take Ron's mind off houses.
So what do your oldest brothers do now that they've left, anyway?
Harry was wondering what a wizard did once he'd finished school.
Charlie's in Romania studying dragons, and Bill's in Africa doing something for Gringotts,
said Ron.
Do you hear about Gringotts? It's been all over the Daily Prophet. But I don't suppose you get that with the Muggles. Someone tried to rob a high-security vault.
Harry stared.
Really? What happened to them?
Nothing. That's why it's such big news. They haven't been caught. My dad says it must have been a powerful dark wizard to get round Gringotts. But they don't think they took anything. That's what's odd. Of course, everyone gets scared when something like this happens, in case you know who's behind it.
Harry turned this news over in his mind. He was starting to get a prickle of fear every time you-know-who was mentioned. He supposed this was all part of entering the magical world, but it had been a lot more comfortable saying Voldemort without worrying.
What's your Quidditch team?
Ron asked.
I don't know any,
Harry confessed.
What?
Ron looked dumbfounded.
Oh, you wait. It's the best game in the world.
And he was off, explaining all about the 4 balls and the positions of the 7 players, describing famous games he'd been to with his brothers and the broomstick he'd like to get if he had the money. He was just taking Harry through the finer points of the game when the compartment door slid open yet again. But it wasn't Neville, the toadless boy, or Hermione Granger this time. 3 boys entered, and Harry recognised the middle one at once. It was the pale boy from Madame Malkin's robe shop. He was looking at Harry with a lot more interest than he'd shown back in Diagon Alley.
Is it true?
He said.
They're saying all down the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment. So it's you, is it?
Yes,
said Harry. He was looking at the other boys. Both of them were thick-set and looked extremely mean. Standing either side of the pale boy, they looked like bodyguards.
Oh, this is Crabbe and this is Goyle,
said the pale boy carelessly, noticing where Harry was looking.
And my name's Malfoy. Draco Malfoy.
Ron gave a slight cough, which might have been hiding a snigger. Draco Malfoy looked at him.
Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. My father told me all the Weasleys have red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford.
He turned back to Harry.
You'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there.
And he held out his hands to shake Harry's. But Harry didn't take it.
I think I can tell who the wrong sort are for myself, thanks,
he said coolly. Draco Malfoy didn't go red, but a pink tinge appeared in his pale cheeks.
I'd be careful if I were you, Potter,
he said slowly.
Unless you're a bit politer, you'll go the same way as your parents. They didn't know what was good for them either. You hang around with riffraff like the Weasleys and that Hagrid, and it'll rub off on you.
Both Harry and Ron stood up. Ron's face was as red as his hair.
Say that again,
he said.
Oh, you're going to fight us, are you?
Malfoy sneered.
Unless you get out now,
said Harry, more bravely than he felt, because Crabbe and Goyle were a lot bigger than him or Ron.
But we don't feel like leaving, do we, boys? eaten all our food, and you still seem to have some.
Goyle reached towards the chocolate frogs next to Ron. Ron leapt forward, but before he'd so much as touched Goyle, Goyle let out a horrible yell. Scabbers the rat was hanging off his finger, sharp little teeth sunk deep into Goyle's knuckle. Crabbe and Malfoy backed away as Goyle swung Scabbers round and round, howling, and when Scabbers finally flew off and hit the window, all three of them disappeared at once. Perhaps they thought there were more rats lurking among the sweets, or perhaps they'd heard footsteps, because a second later, Hermione Granger had come in.
What has been going on?
She said, looking at the sweets all over the floor, and Ron picking up Scabbers by the tail.
I think he's been knocked out,
Ron said to Harry. He looked closer at Scabbers.
No, I don't believe it. But he's gone back to sleep.
And so he had.
You've met Malfoy before?
Harry explained about their meeting in Diagon Alley.
No, I've heard of his family,
said Ron darkly.
But they were some of the first to come back to our side after you-know-who disappeared. Said they'd been bewitched. My dad doesn't believe it. He says Malfoy's father didn't need an excuse to go to the dark side.
He turned to Hermione.
Can we help you with something?
You'd better hurry up and put your robes on. I've just been up to the front to ask the conductor, and he says we're nearly there. You haven't been fighting, have you? You'll be in trouble before we even get there.
Scabbers has been fighting, not us,
said Ron, scowling at her.
Do you mind leaving while we change?
All right. I only came in here because people outside are behaving very childishly, racing up and down the corridors,
said Hermione in a sniffy voice.
And you've got dirt on your nose, by the way. Did you know?
Ron glared at her as she left. Harry peered out of the window. It was getting dark. He could see mountains and forests under a deep purple sky. The train did seem to be slowing down. He and Ron took off their jackets and pulled on their long black robes. Ron's were a bit short for him. You could see his trainers underneath them. A voice echoed through the train.
We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes' time. Please leave your luggage on the train. It will be taken to the school separately.
Harry's stomach lurched with nerves, and Ron, he saw, looked pale under his freckles. They crammed their pockets with the last of the sweets and joined the crowd thronging the corridor. The train slowed right down and finally stopped. People pushed their way towards the door and out onto a tiny, dark platform. Harry shivered in the cold night air. Then a lamp came bobbing over the heads of the students, and Harry heard a familiar voice.
First years. First years over here. We all right there, Harry?
Hagrid's big, hairy face beamed over the sea of heads.
Come on, follow me. Any more first years? Mind your step now. First years, follow me.
Slipping and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down what seemed to be a steep, narrow path. It was so dark either side of them that Harry thought there must be thick trees there. Nobody spoke much. Neville, the boy who kept losing his toad, sniffed once or twice.
You'll get your first sight of Hogwarts in a sec.
Hagrid called over his shoulder.
Just round this bend here.
There was a loud...
Oh.
The narrow path had opened suddenly onto the edge of a great black lake. Perched atop a high mountain on the other side, its windows sparkling in the starry sky, was a vast castle with many turrets and towers.
No more than 4 to a boat,
Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little boats sitting in the water by the shore. Harry and Ron were followed into their boat by Neville and Hermione.
Everyone in?
Shouted Hagrid, who had a boat to himself.
Right then. Forward!
And the fleet of little boats moved off all at once, gliding across the lake, which was as smooth as glass. Everyone was silent, staring up at the great castle overhead. It towered over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff on which it stood.
Heads down,
yelled Hagrid, as the first boats reached the cliff. They all bent their heads and the little boats carried them through a curtain of ivy, which hid a wide opening in the cliff face. They were carried along a dark tunnel, which seemed to be taking them right underneath the castle, until they reached a kind of underground harbour, where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles.
Oi, you there. Is this your toad?
Said Hagrid, who was checking the boats as people climbed out of them.
Trevor!
Cried Neville blissfully, holding out his hands. And then they clambered up a passageway in the rock after Hagrid's lamp, coming out at last onto smooth, damp grass right in the shadow of the castle. They walked up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the huge oak front door.
Everyone here? You there. You still got your toad?
Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door.
Hi, I'm going to read Chapter 7, The Sorting Hat. The door swung open at once. A tall, black-haired witch in an emerald green robe stood there. She had a very stern face, and Harry's first thought was that this was not someone to cross. "The first year's Professor McGonagall," said Hagrid. "Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here." She pulled the door wide. The entrance hall was so big you could have fitted the whole of the Dursleys' house in it. The stone walls were lit with flaming torches, like the ones at Gringotts. The ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marble staircase facing them led to the upper floors. They followed Professor McGonagall across the flagged stone floor. Harry could hear the drone of hundreds of voices from a doorway to the right. The rest of the school must already be here. But Professor McGonagall showed the first years into a small empty chamber off the hall. They crowded in, standing rather closer together than they would usually have done, peering about nervously. "Welcome to Hogwarts," said Professor McGonagall. "The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because while you are here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. You will have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend free time in your house common room. The 4 houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has its own noble history, and each has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule breaking will lose house points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is awarded the House Cup, a great honour. I hope each of you will be a credit to whichever house becomes yours. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you're waiting." Her eyes lingered for a moment on Neville's cloak, which was fastened under his left ear, and on Ron's smudged nose. Harry nervously tried to flatten his hair. "I shall return when we are ready for you," said Professor McGonagall. "Please wait quietly." She left the chamber. Harry swallowed. "How exactly do they sort us into houses?" he asked Ron. "Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking." Harry's heart gave a horrible jolt. A test? In front of the whole school? But he didn't know any magic yet. What on earth would he have to do? He hadn't expected something like this the moment they arrived. He looked around anxiously and saw that everyone else looked terrified too. No one was talking much except Hermione Granger, who was whispering very fast about all the spells she'd learnt and wondering which one she'd need. Harry tried hard not to listen to her. He'd never been more nervous, never, not even when he'd had to take a school report home to the Dursleys, saying that he'd somehow turned his teacher's wig blue. He kept his eyes fixed on the door. Any second now, Professor McGonagall would come back and lead him to his doom. Then something happened, which made him jump about a foot in the air. Several people behind him screamed. "What the—" He gasped. So did the people around him. About 20 ghosts had just streamed through the back wall. Pearly white and slightly transparent, they glided across the room talking to each other and hardly glancing at the first years. They seemed to be arguing. What looked like a fat little monk was saying, "Forgive and forget, I say. We ought to give him a second chance. My dear Friar, haven't we given Peeves all the chances he deserves? He gives us all a bad name, and you know he's not really even a ghost. I say, what are you all doing here?" A ghost wearing a ruff and tights had suddenly noticed the first years. Nobody answered. "New students," said the fat friar, smiling around at them. "About to be sorted, I suppose." A few people nodded mutely. "Hope to see you in Hufflepuff," said the friar. "My old house, you know." "Move along now," said a sharp voice. "The sorting ceremony is about to start." Professor McGonagall had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away through the opposite wall. "Now, form a line," Professor McGonagall told the first years, "and follow me." Feeling oddly as though his legs had turned to lead, Harry got into line behind a boy with sandy hair, with Ron behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the Great Hall. Harry had never even imagined such a strange and splendid place. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles, which were floating in mid-air over 4 long tables, where the rest of the students were sitting. These tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first years up here, so that they came to a halt in a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces staring at them looked like pale lanterns in the flickering candlelight. Dotted here and there among the students, the ghosts shone misty silver. Mainly to avoid all the staring eyes, Harry looked upwards and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, the history." It was hard to believe there was a ceiling there at all, and that the Great Hall didn't simply open onto the heavens. Harry quickly looked down again as Professor McGonagall silently placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard's hat. This hat was patched and frayed and extremely dirty. Aunt Petunia wouldn't have let it in the house. Maybe they had to try and get a rabbit out of it, Harry thought wildly. That seemed the sort of thing. Noticing that everyone in the hall was now staring at the hat, he stared at it too. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing.
"Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top hat sleek and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting cat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see. So try me on and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart. Their daring, nerve, and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin, you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, though I have none, for I'm a thinking cap."
The whole hall burst into applause as the hat finished its song. It bowed to each of the 4 tables and then became quite still again. "So, We've just got to try on the hat, Ron whispered to Harry. I'll kill Fred. He was going on about wrestling a troll. Harry smiled weakly. Yes, trying on the hat was a lot better than having to do a spell, but he did wish they could have tried it on without everyone watching. The hat seemed to be asking rather a lot. Harry didn't feel brave or quick-witted or any of it at the moment. If only the hat had mentioned a house for people who felt a bit queasy. That would have been the one for him. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward, holding a long roll of parchment. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted, she said. Abbott, Hannah. A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of line, put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause. Hufflepuff, shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down at the Hufflepuff table. Harry saw the ghost of the fat friar waving merrily at her. Bones, Susan. Hufflepuff, shouted the hat again, and Susan scuttled off to sit next to Hannah. Boot, Terry. Ravenclaw. The table second from left clapped this time. Several Ravenclaws stood up to shake hands with Terry as he joined them. Brocklehurst, Mandy. Went to Ravenclaw too, but Brown Lavender became the first new Gryffindor, and the table on the far left exploded with cheers. Harry could see Ron's twin brothers catcalling. Bulstrode Millicent then became a Slytherin. Perhaps it was Harry's imagination. After all, he'd heard about Slytherin, but he thought they looked an unpleasant lot. He was starting to feel definitely sick now. He remembered being picked for teams during sports lessons at his old school. He had always been last to be chosen, not because he was no good, but because no one wanted Dudley to think they liked him. Finch Fletchley Justin. Hufflepuff. Sometimes, Harry noticed, the hat shouted out the house at once, but at others it took a little while to decide. Finnegan Seamus. The sandy-haired boy next to Harry in the line sat on the stool for almost a whole minute before the hat declared him a Gryffindor. Granger Hermione. Hermione almost ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head. Gryffindor, shouted the hat. Ron groaned. A horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts always do when you're very nervous. What if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he just sat there with the hat over his eyes for ages until Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said there had obviously been a mistake and he'd better get back on the train? When Neville Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toad, was called, he fell over on his way to the stool. The hat took a long time to decide with Neville. When it finally shouted, Gryffindor, Neville ran off still wearing it and had to jog back amid gales of laughter to give it to McDougal Morag. Malfoy swaggered forward when his name was called and got his wish at once. The hat had barely touched his head when it screamed, Slytherin! Malfoy went to join his friends, Crabbe and Goyle, looking pleased with himself. There weren't many people left now. Moon, Not, Parkinson, then a pair of twin girls, Patil and Patil, then Perks, Sally-Ann, and then at last, Potter, Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out like little hissing fires all over the hall. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter. The last thing Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Next second, he was looking at the black inside of the hat. He waited. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind, either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now, that's interesting. So where shall I put you? Harry gripped the edges of the stool and thought, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. Not Slytherin, eh? Said the small voice. Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. No? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor. Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the whole hall. He took off the hat and walked shakily towards the Gryffindor table. He was so relieved to have been chosen and not put in Slytherin, he hardly noticed that he was getting the loudest cheer yet. Percy the prefect got up and shook his hand vigorously while the Weasley twins yelled, Wake up, Potter! Wake up, Potter! Harry sat down opposite the ghost in the rough he'd seen earlier. The ghost patted his arm, giving Harry the sudden horrible feeling he'd just plunged it into a bucket of ice-cold water. He could see the high table properly now. At the end nearest him sat Hagrid, who caught his eye and gave him a thumbs up. Harry grinned back, and there, in the centre of the high table, in a large gold chair, sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry recognised him at once from the card he'd got out of the chocolate frog on the train. Dumbledore's silver hair was the only thing in the whole hall that shone as brightly as the ghost's. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell too, the nervous young man from the leaky cauldron. He was looking very peculiar in a large purple turban. And now there were only 3 people left to be sorted. Turpin Lisa became a Ravenclaw, and then it was Ron's turn. He was pale green by now. Harry crossed his fingers under the table, and a second later the Hat had shouted, Gryffindor! Harry clapped loudly with the rest as Ron collapsed into the chair next to him. Well done, Ron, excellent, said Percy Weasley pompously across Harry as Zabini Blaze was made a Slytherin. Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Harry looked down at his empty gold plate. He had only just realised how hungry he was. The pumpkin pasties seemed ages ago. Albus Dumbledore had got to his feet. He was beaming at the students. His arms opened wide, as if nothing could have pleased him more than to see them all there. Welcome, he said. Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words, and here they are. Nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak. Thank you. He sat back down. Everybody clapped and cheered. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. Is he a bit mad? He asked Percy uncertainly. Mad? Said Percy airily. He's a genius. Best wizard in the world. But he is a bit mad, yes. Potatoes, Harry? Harry's mouth fell open. The dishes in front of him were now piled with food. He had never seen so many things he liked to eat on one table. Roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops and lamb chops, sausages, bacon and steak, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, chips, Yorkshire pudding, peas, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and for some strange reason, mint humbugs. The Dursleys had never exactly starved Harry, but he'd never been allowed to eat as much as he liked. Dudley had always taken anything that Harry really wanted, even if it made him sick. Harry piled his plate with a bit of everything except the humbugs and began to eat. It was all delicious. That does look good, said the ghost in the rough, sadly watching Harry cut up his steak. Can't you? I haven't eaten for nearly 500 years, said the ghost. I don't need to, of course, but one does miss it. I don't think I've introduced myself. Sir Nicholas Dumimsy Porpington at your service, resident ghost of Gryffindor Tower. Oh, I know who you are, said Ron suddenly. My brother's told me about you. You're nearly Headless Nick. I would prefer you to call me Sir Nicholas Dumimsy, the ghost began stiffly. But sandy-haired Seamus Finnegan interrupted. Nearly headless. How can you be nearly headless? Sir Nicholas looked extremely miffed, as if their little chat wasn't going at all the way he wanted. Like this, he said irritably. He seized his left ear and pulled. His whole head swung off his neck and fell onto his shoulder as if it was on a hinge. Someone had obviously tried to behead him, but not done it properly. Looking pleased at the stunned looks on their faces, nearly Headless Nick flipped his head back onto his neck, coughed, and said, So, new Gryffindors, I hope you're going to help us win the House Championship this year. Gryffindor have never gone so long without winning. Slytherin have got the cup 6 years in a row. The bloody Baron's becoming almost unbearable. He's the Slytherin ghost. Harry looked over at the Slytherin table and saw a horrible ghost sitting there, with blank staring eyes, a gaunt face and robes stained with silver blood. He was right next to Malfoy, who, Harry was pleased to see, didn't look too pleased with the seating arrangements. How did he get covered in blood? Asked Seamus with great interest. I've never asked, said nearly Headless Nick delicately. When everyone had eaten as much as they could, the remains of the food faded from the plates, leaving them sparkling clean as before. A moment later, the puddings appeared. Blocks of ice cream in every flavour you could think of. Apple pies, treacle tarts, chocolate eclairs, and jam donuts, trifles, strawberries, jelly, rice pudding. As Harry helped himself to a treacle tart, the talk turned to their families. I'm half and half, said Seamus. Me dad's a mogul. Mam didn't tell him she was a witch till after they were married. Bit of a nasty shock for him. The others laughed. What about you, Neville? Said Ron.
Well, my gran brought me up and she's a witch,
said Neville.
but the family thought I was all muggle for ages. My great-uncle Algie kept trying to catch me off my guard and force some magic out of me. He pushed me off the end of Blackpool Pier once, nearly drowned. But nothing happened until I was 8. Great-uncle Algie came round for tea and he was hanging me out of an upstairs window by the ankles when my great-auntie Enid offered him a meringue and he accidentally let go. But I bounced all the way down the garden into the road. They were all really pleased. Gran was crying. She was so happy. And, you should have seen their faces when I got in here. They thought I might not be magic enough to come, you see. Great-uncle Algie was so pleased, he brought me my toad.
On Harry's other side, Percy Weasley and Hermione were talking about lessons. I do hope they start straight away. There's so much to learn. I'm particularly interested in transfiguration. You know, turning something into something else. Of course, it's supposed to be very difficult. You'll be starting small, just matches into needles and that sort of thing. Harry, who was starting to feel warm and sleepy, looked up at the high table again. Hagrid was drinking deeply from his goblet. Professor McGonagall was talking to Professor Dumbledore. Professor Quirrell, in his absurd turban, was talking to a teacher with greasy black hair, a hooked nose, and sallow skin. It happened very suddenly. The hook-nosed teacher looked past Quirrell's turban straight into Harry's eyes, and a sharp, hot pain shot across the scar on Harry's forehead. Ouch! Harry clapped a hand to his head. What is it? Asked Percy. Nothing. The pain had gone as quickly as it had come. Harder to shake off was the feeling Harry had got from the teacher's look, a feeling that he didn't like Harry at all. Who's that teacher talking to Professor Quirrell? He asked Percy. Oh, you know Quirrell already, do you? No wonder he's looking so nervous. That's Professor Snape. He teaches potions, but he doesn't want to. Everyone knows he's after Quirrell's job. Knows an awful lot about the dark arts. Snape. Harry watched Snape for a while, but Snape didn't look back at him again. At last, the puddings too disappeared, and Professor Dumbledore got to his feet again. The hall fell silent.
Just a few more words now we're all fed and watered. I have a few start-of-term notices to give you. First years should note that the forest in the grounds is forbidden to all pupils, and a few of our older students would do well to remember that as well.
Dumbledore's twinkling eyes flashed in the direction of the Weasley twins.
I have also been asked by Mr. Filch, the caretaker, to remind you all that no magic should be used between classes in the corridors. Quidditch trials will be held in the second week of term. Anyone interested in playing for their house teams should contact Madam Hooch. And finally, I must tell you that this year the third floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death.
Harry laughed, but he was one of the few who did. He's not serious, he muttered to Percy. Must be, said Percy, frowning at Dumbledore. It's odd, because he usually gives us a reason why we're not allowed to go somewhere. The forest's full of dangerous beasts, everyone knows that. I do think he might have told us prefects, at least.
And now, before we go to bed, let us sing the school song,
cried Dumbledore. Harry noticed that the other teachers' smiles had become rather fixed. Dumbledore gave his wand a little flick, as if he was trying to get a fly off the end, and a long golden ribbon flew out of it, which rose high above the tables and twisted itself snake-like into words.
Everyone pick their favourite tune, said Dumbledore, and off we go.
And the school bellowed.
Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hoggy-warty Hogwarts. Teach us something, please. Whether we be old and bald or young with scabby knees, our heads could do with filling with some interesting stuff. For now they're bare and full of air, dead flies, and bits of fluff. So teach us things worth knowing. Bring back what we've forgot. Just do your best. We'll do the rest and learn until our brains all rot. Thank you.
Everybody finished the song at different times. At last, only the Weasley twins were left singing along to a very slow funeral march. Dumbledore conducted their last few lines with his wand, and when they had finished, He was one of those who clapped loudest.
Ah, music, he said, wiping his eyes. A magic beyond all we do here. And now, bedtime. Off you trot.
The Gryffindor first years followed Percy through the chattering crowds, out of the great hall and up the marble staircase. Harry's legs were like lead again, but only because he was so tired and full of food. He was too sleepy even to be surprised that the people in the portraits along the corridors whispered and pointed as they passed, or that twice Percy led them through doorways hidden behind sliding panels and hanging tapestries. They climbed more staircases, yawning and dragging their feet, and Harry was just wondering how much further they had to go when they came to a sudden halt. A bundle of walking sticks was floating in mid-air ahead of them, and as Percy took a step towards them, they started throwing themselves at him. "Peeves," Percy whispered to the first years, "a poltergeist." He raised his voice. "Peeves, show yourself." A loud, rude sound, like the air being let out of a balloon, answered. "Do you want me to go to the Bloody Baron?" There was a pop, and a little man with wicked dark eyes and a wide mouth appeared, floating cross-legged in the air, clutching the walking sticks. "Ooh," he said, with an evil cackle. "Ickle firsties, what fun!" He swooped suddenly at them. They all ducked. "Go away, Peeves, or the Baron will hear about this. I mean it," barked Percy. Peeves stuck out his tongue and vanished, dropping the walking sticks on Neville's head. They heard him zooming away, rattling coats of armour as he passed. "You want to watch out for Peeves," said Percy, as they set off again. "The Bloody Baron's the only one who can control him. He won't even listen to us prefects. Here we are." At the very end of the corridor hung a portrait of a very fat woman in a pink silk dress. "Password," she said. "Caput Draconis," said Percy, and the portrait swung forward to reveal a round hole in the wall. They all scrambled through it. Neville needed a leg up, and found themselves in the Gryffindor common room, a cosy, round room full of squashy armchairs. Percy directed the girls through one door to their dormitory, and the boys through another. At the top of a spiral staircase, they were obviously in one of the towers, they found their beds at last. 5 four-posters hung with deep red velvet curtains. Their trunks had already been brought up. Too tired to talk much, they pulled on their pyjamas and fell into bed. "Great food, isn't it?" Ron muttered to Harry through the hangings. "Get off, Scabbers! He's chewing my sheets." Harry was going to ask Ron if he'd had any of the treacle tart, but he fell asleep almost at once. Perhaps Harry had eaten a bit too much because he had a very strange dream. He was wearing Professor Quirrell's turban, which kept talking to him, telling him he must transfer to Slytherin at once because it was his destiny. Harry told the turban he didn't want to be in Slytherin. It got heavier and heavier. He tried to pull it off, but it tightened painfully, and there was Malfoy, laughing at him as he struggled with it. Then Malfoy turned into the hook-nosed teacher, Snape, whose laugh became high and cold. There was a burst of green light, and Harry woke, sweating and shaking. He rolled over and fell asleep again. And when he woke next day, he didn't remember the dream at all.
Hi everyone, my name is Alia Bhatt. I live in India. I'm an actor, and today I'm about to read you actually one of my favorite chapters from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Here goes. Chapter 8, The Potions Master.
There, look. Where? Next to the tall kid with the red hair. Wearing the glasses. Did you see his face? Did you see his scar?
Whispers followed Harry from the moment he left his dormitory next day. People queuing outside classrooms stood on tiptoe to get a look at him, or double back to pass him in the corridors, again staring. Harry wished they wouldn't, because he was trying to concentrate on finding his way to classes. There were 142 staircases at Hogwarts, wide sweeping ones, narrow rickety ones, some that led somewhere different on a Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. Then
There were doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely or tickled them in exactly the right place, and doors that weren't really doors at all, but solid walls just pretending. It was also very hard to remember where anything was, because it all seemed to move around a lot. The people in the portraits kept going to visit each other, and Harry was sure the coats of armor could walk. The ghost didn't help either. It was always a nasty shock when one of them glided suddenly through a door you were trying to open. Nearly headless Nick was always happy to point new Gryffindors in the right direction. But Peeves, the poltergeist, was worth 2 locked doors and a trick staircase if you met him when you were late for class. He would drop waste paper baskets on your head, pull rugs from under your feet, pelt you with bits of chalk, or sneak up behind you invisible, grab your nose and screech, "Got your conch!" Even worse than Peeves, if that was possible, was the caretaker, Argus Filch. Harry and Ron had managed to get on the wrong side of him on their very first morning. Filch found them trying to force their way through a door, which unluckily turned out to be the entrance to the out-of-bounds corridor on the 3rd floor. He wouldn't believe they were lost, was sure they were trying to break into it on purpose, and was threatening to lock them in the dungeons when they were rescued by Professor Quirrell, who was passing. Filch owned a cat called Mrs. Norris, a scrawny, dust-colored creature with bulging, lamp-like eyes, just like Filch's. She patrolled the corridors alone. Break a rule in front of her, put just one toe out of line, and she'd whisk off for Filch, who would appear wheezing 2 seconds later. Filch knew the secret passageways of the school better than anyone, except perhaps the Weasley twins, and could pop up as suddenly as any of the ghosts. The students all hated him, and it was the dearest ambition of many to give Mrs. Norris a good kick. And then, once you had managed to find them, there were the lessons themselves. There was a lot more to magic, as Harry quickly found out, than waving your wand and saying a few funny words. They had to study the night skies through their telescopes every Wednesday at midnight and learn the names of different stars and the movements of the planets. 3 times a week, they went out to the greenhouses behind the castle to study herbology with a dumpy little witch called Professor Sprout, where they learned how to take care of all the strange plants and fungi and found out what they were used for. Easily, the most boring lesson was History of Magic, which was the only class taught by a ghost. Professor Binns had been very old indeed when he had fallen asleep in front of the staff room fire and got up the next morning to teach, leaving his body behind him. Binns droned on and on while they scribbled down names and dates and got Emmerich the Evil and Eric the Oddball mixed up. Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, was a tiny little wizard who had to stand on a pile of books to see over his desk. At the start of their first lesson, he took the register, and when he reached Harry's name, he gave an excited squeak and toppled out of sight. Professor McGonagall was again different. Harry had been quite right to think she wasn't a teacher to cross. Strict and clever, she gave them a talking to the moment they had sat down in her first class. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she said. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned. Then she changed her desk into a pig and back again. They were all very impressed and couldn't wait to get started, but soon realized they weren't going to be changing the furniture into animals for a long time. After making a lot of complicated notes, they were each given a match and started trying to turn it into a needle. By the end of the lesson, only Hermione Granger had made any difference to her match. Professor McGonagall showed the class how it had gotten all silver and pointy and gave Hermione a rare smile. The class everyone had really been looking forward to was Defense Against the Dark Arts, but Quirrell's lessons turned out to be a bit of a joke. His classroom smelled strongly of garlic, which everyone said was to ward off a vampire he met in Romania and was afraid would be coming back to get him one of these days. His turban, he told them, had been given to him by an African prince as a thank you for getting rid of a troublesome zombie. But they weren't sure they believed the story. For one thing, when Seamus Finnegan asked eagerly to hear how Quirrell had fought off the zombie, Quirrell went pink and started talking about the weather. For another, they had noticed that a funny smell hung around the turban, and the Weasley twins insisted that it was stuffed full of garlic as well, so that Quirrell was protected wherever he went. Harry was very relieved to find out that he wasn't miles behind everyone else. Lots of people had come from Muggle families, and like him, hadn't any idea that they were witches and wizards. There was so much to learn that even people like Ron didn't have much of a head start. Friday was an important day for Harry and Ron. They finally managed to find their way down to the Great Hall for breakfast without getting lost once. "What have we got today?" Harry asked Ron as he poured sugar on his porridge. "Double portions with the Slytherins," said Ron. "Snape's head of Slytherin House. They say he always favors them. We'll be able to say if it's true." "Wish McGonagall favored us," said Harry. Professor McGonagall was head of Gryffindor House, but it hadn't stopped her giving them a huge pile of homework the day before. Just then, the post arrived. Harry had got used to this by now, but it had given him a bit of a shock on the first morning when about 100 owls had suddenly streamed into the Great Hall during breakfast, circling the tables until they saw their owners and dropping letters and packages onto their laps. Hedwig hadn't brought Harry anything so far. She sometimes flew in to nibble his ear and have a bit of toast before going off to sleep in the owlery with the other school owls. This morning, however, she fluttered down between the marmalade and the sugar bowl and dropped a note onto Harry's plate. Harry tore it open at once. "Dear Harry," it said in a very untidy scrawl, "I know you get Friday afternoons off, so would you like to come and have a cup of tea with me around 3? I want to hear all about your first week. Send us an answer back with Hedwig, Hagrid." Harry borrowed Ron's scribbled, "Yes, please, see you later," on the back of the note and sent Hedwig off again. It was lucky that Harry had tea with Hagrid to look forward to, because the potions lesson turned out to be the worst thing that had happened to him so far. At the start of term banquet, Harry had got the idea that Professor Snape disliked him. By the end of the first potions lesson, he knew he'd been wrong. Snape didn't dislike Harry. He hated him. Potions lesson took place down in one of the dungeons. It was colder here than up in the main castle, and would have been quite creepy enough without the pickled animals floating in jars all around the walls. Snape, like Flitwick, started the class by taking the register, and like Flitwick, he paused at Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "Harry Potter, our new celebrity." Draco Malfoy and his friends, Crabbe and Goyle, sniggered behind their hands. Snape finished calling their names and looked up at the class. His eyes were black like Hagrid's, but they had none of Hagrid's warmth. They were cold and empty and made you think of dark tunnels. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making," he began. He spoke in barely more than a whisper, but they caught every word. Like Professor McGonagall, Snape had the gift of keeping a class silent without effort. "As there is little foolish wand-waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. Don't expect you will really understand the beauty of softly simmering cauldron, with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, ensnaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stopper death. If you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach." More silence followed this little speech. Harry and Ron exchanged looks with raised eyebrows. Hermione Granger was on the edge of her seat and looked desperate to start proving that she wasn't a dunderhead. "Potter," said Snape suddenly, "what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" "Powdered root of what? To an infusion of what?" Harry glanced at Ron, who looked as stumped as he was. Hermione's hand had shot into the air. "I don't know, sir," said Harry. Snape's lips curled into a sneer. "Tut, tut. Fame clearly isn't everything." He ignored Hermione's hand. "Let's try again, Potter. Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" Hermione stretched her hand as high into the air as it could go without her leaving her seat. But Harry didn't have the faintest idea what a bezoar was. He tried not to look at Malfoy, Crabbe and Goyle, who were shaking with laughter. I don't know, sir." "Thought you wouldn't open a book before coming here, Potter." Harry forced himself to keep looking straight into those cold eyes. He had looked through his books at the Dursleys, but did Snape expect him to remember everything in 1,000 magical herbs and fungi? Snape was still ignoring Hermione's quivering hand. What is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane? At this, Hermione stood up, her hand stretching towards the dungeon ceiling. I don't know, said Harry quietly. I think Hermione does, though. Why don't you try her? A few people laughed. Harry caught Shearmiss's eye and Shearmiss winked. Snape, however, was not pleased.
Got an errand to run, so I'm going to go ahead and end stream here. I'll pick up with Harry Potter when we come back. So if I don't catch you again, hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy the Harry Potter stories. And if you do come back, well, I'll be happy to have you. I'll see you after a bit. I gotta go run an errand and I'll be back.